All right, guys, I just wanted to give an update on the college football playoff officially expanding and how that affects possible conference realignment. We've got this breakthrough article, how college football playoff expansion will affect realignment, job security, and the future of the sport. We all love that the playoff is getting expanded. Of course, the details are still to be ironed out. We will talk about that. Now, it says right off the bat in this video, it's the Power 2 and everyone else, that coming from the AAC commissioner in reference to the Big Ten and the SEC. They also say revenue sharing is coming with players, and of course it is. My goodness, these are multi-billion-dollar TV contracts. When it comes to paying players and how much should the players get, that's where it gets extremely, extremely complicated, and I would not want to sit here for 15 minutes and decide how much money, what percent the players actually would get, but they're definitely going to be getting something. And this all goes back to the whole idea of why college football needed NIL in terms of survival, because what you would have happen if you were not paying these kids, you would have a lot more Micah Parsons situations where they'd say, listen, I'm coming off a great sophomore year. I'm going to be a first-round pick. I don't have to play another snap. Look at Bryce Young, for example. Bryce Young could have just sat out this year, gone on, probably been the number 1, number 2 overall pick in the draft, not have any injury risk. That's why you need the NIL incentive for these kids to want to play, to get more money, and that's really why it's coming in. And now we're talking about giving these players some of the revenue in terms of how much money each one of these teams gets off of the TV deal, things like that. When you're talking about billions and billions of dollars, players are going to want a piece of that pie. Is it, healthy? No, I don't think it's healthy, but this is capitalism. This is what it is. Let's be honest. These players, the reason the sport is so big is because of the players. We understand that there's a lot that goes into it, but it's just, this is inevitable. And then it gives us numbers. It says going forward, here's one's educated guess on the future distribution, assuming a doubling of the annual revenue brought in by the college football playoff from $600 million to $1.2 billion. And that is due to the expansion going from 4 teams to 12 teams. And that's also why there's a major incentive to get this thing done and get the playoff expanded by 2024. Because that's still in flux right now. There's people saying they're not going to get all the logistics together. It's not going to be happening until 2026. But with this money factor, you're basically making an extra $500 million. I believe they'll be able to work everything out and get this thing done by 2024. Is it ideal? No. Ideally, you would have had the college football playoff expanded 9 months ago when the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 voted against it. But still, I think money being the obvious number one motivating factor, the playoff will be expanded by 2024. Even though it's going to be a rush, it's hard to do. The money's there, so they're going to get it done. And you can see it says the SEC and the Big Ten combined to get half of the total, which is $600 million, so they'd be each making $300 million. That is an additional around $17 million per year for each of those leagues' schools with an expanded playoff. Every team in the SEC and the Big Ten are making an extra $17 million. And guys, that's pretty crazy considering Notre Dame's current TV deal with NBC is $30 million. So teams in the SEC and Big Ten, this is not a TV deal. This is due to the playoff. But they're making an extra $17 million. The Pac-12's rumored TV deal was $25 million in their negotiation. So these numbers are impressive. The ACC, Big 12, and Pac-12, depending on the membership, split 30% of the pot, $360 million. So $120 million each. That's approximately $10 million more more per year for those schools. And then the group of 5 conferences would split the remaining 20% of the pot, $240 million total for the group of 5 schools, of course. And then this is the big thing. Will realignment slow down? That remains to be determined. I don't think the playoff expanding will have any major effect on realignment slowing down, speeding up. Guys, realignment is all about money in terms of which teams can I attract to my conference that will give me a better TV deal. And then if you're a team that's in another conference, like a USC, like a UCLA, which conference can I join where I can make more money on a TV deal? It's all about money. So the idea that expanding the playoff is going to cause teams not to want to leave their conference, teams are not motivated by putting themselves in the best position to be successful. If USC's goal was to put themselves in the best position to make the playoffs, they would stay in the Pac-12. That's not their goal. They don't care that they might have to face Ohio State every year in the Big Ten Championship. They don't care that they might have to have games in Michigan, at Michigan State, in November when it's 30 degrees. They care about money. So when looking at this, realignment is never about setting yourself up to be, a team saying, we're going to stay in this conference because it's a 12-team playoff and we have a better chance in this worst conference. Oregon has a way better chance of making a 12-team playoff in the current Pac-12 than they do going to the Big Ten. But if Oregon gets offered a chance to get into the Big Ten, they're taking it 100 times out of 100. Realignment is all about money. It's all about TV money. It's all about you win, I win. The Big Ten wants Oregon because it gives them a West Wing. Oregon wants more money. They triple the amount of money they get every year with a major TV deal that's funded by Fox, NBC, and CBS. Realignment is about money. So no, I don't think realignment would have much of an effect with the playoff expanding. It might actually even help the Big Ten and the SEC because they have such, an absurd monopoly over the sport. And they'd be getting even more money per team, around $17 million, with the expanded playoff and the expanded games, the expanded revenue, the expanded ratings, everything that factors into it. And apparently, guys, the other thing I did want to say, we are apparently getting on-campus games for the first round. So when you look at a 12-team playoff, the first teams that have byes will not be playing any games on campus. Those will all be neutral site games in the second round, in the third round, and then obviously the national championship. But in that first round, when it's 5v12, 6v11, 7v10, 8v9, all of those games will be on-campus games. And then the next round is when they start the New Year's 6 games. That is the current format we're looking at. I just wanted to make sure people knew that. It says realignment certainly got the presidents motivated for the good of the game. This change comes while Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren continues to push his university presidents to add 4 more teams from the Pac-12. The Big 12 commissioner has declared his conference open for business. So they're just giving a synopsis on how realignment is shaping up. In the end, there will be more emphasis on conference success determined by how many teams a league can have in the 12. The simple math would tell you. So obviously I would expect the SEC to have the most teams, but it could certainly be the Big Ten. The Big Ten is going to be a really good league as long as USC continues to rise. With Lincoln Riley there, they've done such a good job in recruiting. You add a powerhouse like that. We'll see with Texas and Oklahoma. The SEC is certainly going to be a powerhouse. And then I thought this was a pretty undervalued factor of the playoff expansion. It's the Cinderella Factor. And guys, you want to know something I keep hearing from people who are obsessed with the 4-team playoff and why we should stay at 4 teams? They say, look at all the blowouts. Alabama, Clemson blowing all these teams out in the playoff semifinal. It's just going to get worse. Guys, you're using 1-game samples, 2-game samples in a specific year to say that if we expanded the playoff and made a 5v12 matchup, that matchup's automatically going to be a blowout because Alabama blew someone out in 2017, because Clemson blew Ohio State out in 2018. You know how stupid that is? Come on, guys. That can't be your argument for why you want to stay at 4 teams. We could legitimately get a Cinderella team like a 12 seed or an 11 seed. I'm not saying they're going to beat Alabama, but it gets more fun, the idea of it. March Madness is marketed for Cinderella teams to make runs. Now, obviously, I'm not saying it certainly is easier to beat a big, bad team in college basketball, just the way the game is, than college football. I get that. But still, there's a greater chance, and you can't just dismiss the possibility because looking at a specific one-game sample from 2016, Alabama or Clemson destroyed Notre Dame, so we need to keep the playoff at 4 teams, and it's all going to be blowouts if we expand it. That is so ridiculous. You're taking a one-game sample from a specific year. It's just not logical. If you have 5v12, 6v11, 7v10, 8v9, those games, most of them, I would assume, are going to be very close spreads, especially the 8v9, 7v10. So that's just my take on the whole idea that if we expand, it's going to create a bunch of blowouts. We need more programs with the hope of, the playoff needs to be treated as a postseason. Right now, the playoff is this exclusive. It's basically college basketball's Final Four. That's what it is. There needs to be something that gets you to the Final Four, not the regular season. There needs to be some postseason that gets you to that Final Four playoff teams, and the 16-team or the 12-team playoff, facilitates that. And all you've got to do, if you're one of the top 4 seeds, is win one more game. That's all we're asking. Just win one more game. And it's going to make college football better. It's going to keep Kenny Pickett and Kenneth Walker from sitting out of a New Year's Six Bowl. I mean, what is the way you solve that? You give them NIL money? You give them an NIL. They're saying, how do you solve that? You give them NIL contracts, and that's going to force them to play in meaningless bowl games when you've got first-round running backs who, don't want to risk injury. Come on, guys. The playoff had to be expanded. It was the only option. It gives us games that are actually meaningful. You've got players sitting out of the Rose Bowl. Multiple years that's been happening recently. You have to do something. So, guys, overall, my major takeaway from this article is that realignment, in my opinion, will not. It says it's to be determined. I don't think realignment is going to be affected very much by the playoff expanding. This is all about money, and it's all about TV deals. That's what that whole situation is. A team's not going to want to stay in a conference because, now we have a 12-team playoff, so it's going to be easier to get to the playoff if we're in a watered-down Pac-12. It doesn't matter. Obviously, if, Oregon stays in the watered-down Pac-12, they've got an easier path to the playoff than going into the Big Ten, but they're going to make way more money in the Big Ten. So they're going to go to the Big Ten. So it's all about money, guys. And again, this might actually even help. The playoff expanding might even help the Big Two conferences attract even more teams because they're getting such a massive share of the overall money. I believe it's 50% total for those 2 conferences in total payout. I don't know if that would be reallocated or... Oh, no, it wouldn't be. Well, maybe it would be if they added more teams. Maybe they'd get even more money if they added more teams, like the Big Ten adding the West Wing, which, in my opinion, it's when that happens, not if. That is going to happen. The Big Ten will be adding a West Wing. They will not have a conference that unbalanced. The travel, it makes no sense. It's just so easy. Obviously, any of those 4 schools would accept an invite to the Big Ten. It's too simple. It's too clear that that's going to be the strategy the Big Ten uses. The big question becomes, does the SEC do anything in response to that? And that's where things get real shady, and then we start speculating on the ACC's grant of rights, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. So, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.